Conjoined twins, Texas law said, sorry, you have to. And also, conjoined twins, you know what else that is? That is a C-section. You're not just forcing people to carry a non-viable pregnancy. Now you are also forcing them to undergo a major abdominal surgery. Not a single person who actually cares about health and well-being could argue with a straight face that this makes any fucking sense. This is so insane. Also, can I please remind you, we don't have universal health care. So you're not only forcing people to do this, you're forcing them to pay for it. She doesn't have the money to leave the state, and you are forcing her to pay for a C-section and a hospital stay. I can't. 2-hour surgery, scar tissue from 3 previous C-sections. God dang it. It keeps getting better. 0% chance of viability for either twin. New abortion laws made it so that she had no choice. She's at the end of the pregnancy now and said that the babies might not be alive when they're born. We might be able to not show them to you. I would tell her, destroy your uterus and commit you to having a hysterectomy because I can't get them out through a normal incision. They might be strong enough to go to the NICU and then you can also pay that bill, but they're still not going to live. You might get to say hello and goodbye. We don't know. We don't know what's going to happen. It's not going to be fun though. Can tell you that. She was trying to be hopeful for a miracle, thinking that doctors could be wrong. Why would the state of Texas make her carry this doomed pregnancy if there wasn't some chance? Because dictator Paxton likes to control people. As a blur of blue scrubs bobbed around her, Miranda listened for the word uterus. The nurses had told her that when she heard this word, it meant the doctors were preparing to move the twins from the safety of her womb into a world where they couldn't survive. She tried to stay awake long enough to find out whether she was going to get to meet her children. They had just moved to Texas in December of 2022, packed up the whole family, all their possessions, and their pet chameleon. Oh, that's so cute. Time to go home. They met at a Dungeons and Dragons game near Texarkana in the northeastern corner of the state. Miranda, now 26, was a tattooed single mom with bright pink hair who had moved around a lot, seeking a better life for her children. Levi was a younger, goofier, very into video games, but easily stepped into a fatherly role. The family had spent the last few months in Utah, where Levi, 25, worked as a coal miner, but after they had their first child together, they decided to return to this rural corner of the country where Texas, Oklahoma, and Arkansas meet. That's Texarkana City in Texas, Arkansas, and Oklahoma. It's in Texas. I don't know if there's a counterpart on the Arkansas side. Anyway, they rented an apartment in New Boston, deep in the East Texas piney woods, and Levi got a job nearby at Tyson Chicken. That's their family. When she learned that she was pregnant with twins, they told her mom, and they had a gender reveal party and started planning for 5 under 5. All that was left was to surprise Levi's parents. In late December, Levi called and told them to check the mailbox for an early Christmas present. When they got outside, they saw Levi and Miranda's dusty minivan making its way up the driveway. Levi's mom was thrilled, rushing to the store to buy more presents for Christmas morning. Miranda had a difficult upbringing and wasn't close to much of her family, so she loved the idea of raising her children surrounded by Levi's tight-knit clan. They embraced her and her children, wrapping the young mother in unconditional love and free babysitting. When Miranda found out she was pregnant again in February, it felt like a blessing to be back in Texas. She and Levi always planned to have another child, but didn't think it would happen so soon. As they would learn, rural Texas is a difficult place to bring new life into the world. She found out it was twins and went to the emergency room half an hour away, where she learned that they might be conjoined or mono-mono. Mono-mono is in the same amniotic sac, so they share a sac and a placenta. It can be hard to tell early on exactly what's going on. So this is a diagnosis that often cannot be made like really early in the pregnancy. It can be sometimes. They went to a specialist outside of Dallas, and that required time off work, coordinating travel, childcare, all of the things that we just discussed earlier about why some people cannot leave the state for a pregnancy termination. Levi and his mom, Angela, watched on the screen, and Miranda watched the tech's face. She alone saw the moment that it fell, describing the way that the ultrasound tech's face changed when the tech realized that she was scanning conjoined twins, incredibly rare and also very commonly incompatible with life. She ran out of the room. My heart sank. Miranda said, I knew something was wrong. This time, there was no weeks-long wait for follow-up appointment. Within hours, she was sitting in front of a maternal fetal medicine specialist, and he was showing her on a whiteboard all the things that he was talking about and why this would not be a pregnancy that ended with a happy ending. Their spines were twisted, curling so sharply it looked at some angles as if they disappeared entirely. Organs were hanging out of their bodies or didn't develop at all. One of the babies had a clubfoot and the other a bubble of fluid at the top of the neck. It was, in many ways, a simple diagnosis. As soon as these babies were born, they would die. Levi burst into tears, big, ugly crying. Miranda was paralyzed, her mind frantically scrabbling for something to hold on to. These babies she'd hoped, dreamed, and planned for were suddenly being ripped away from her. Nobody who wants to have abortions for funsies, something nobody does, by the way, anyway, describes the moment that they found out this was happening as having everything they had hoped, planned, and dreamed for ripped away from them. Okay? There is no compassion in these laws. She looked for answers, and the doctor had left the room. A few minutes later, the nurse came back and handed them a Post-it note, written on it the name of an abortion clinic in New Mexico. Okay? Do you see that this is what you make happen? You take somebody on the worst day of their life, and you force their doctors to make it worse. I can't talk to you about what to do. I can't help you. I could lose my ability to feed my family if I help you, because I could go to jail. And instead of sitting with our patients, talking with them, giving them options, talking through conversations we've all had 100 times about you have a choice and neither of the options are good and neither of the options is correct or right. You have a choice, you have to make it, and it's not fair. Instead of that, you get a Post-it note. This is heartbreaking. In June of 2022, Texas became the largest state in the nation to ban abortion to protect the life of every child with a heartbeat. Doctors who perform abortion can face up to life in prison unless it's to save the life of the pregnant patient. Thank you, Governor Greg Abbott, associate to Dictator Paxson, for making sure that we save the life of every child with a heartbeat at the expense of the living, breathing human in front of you. Twins were developing without proper lungs or stomachs, one kidney for the two of them. They would not survive. They still had heartbeat, and the state said, we will protect them. So she goes home to grieve. She has no guidance from her doctors, as we discussed. She would have been able to terminate this pregnancy a few years ago. Again, even then, it was hard to do, but not impossible. They could perform them past 20 weeks in the event of severe and irreversible abnormalities, and we could offer that, but it still was not easy, and it was a lot of red tape. So now she's boxed in by abortion bans, and Miranda had never considered abortion for herself and didn't have much of an opinion on the issue, but Levi's family was more religious, conservative, had a big Trump 2024 flag in their yard. But Levi's mom had been in the room with the doctor. She knew the odds, and she knew the sacrifice it would take to carry this pregnancy to term. The family would support her decision, whatever it was. I wouldn't be shamed for it if I did. They told me they would support my decision. And you know what? I mean, I can't tell you how many times I have taken care of patients who have told me 6 weeks ago I would have called people who choose what I'm choosing murderers. And today I get it. Now I get it. Nobody should have to make choices with these two horrible options. 12-hour drive from Northeast Texas to New Mexico. They couldn't get time off work, pay for gas, hotels, procedure. When she thought of the fear radiating off of her doctor, the idea of circumventing the law and fleeing the state for medical care terrified her, as it would. All the what ifs that nobody was answering, absolutely heartbreaking. If this had happened when she was a single mom, responsible for her young children, how would she even find a way? Oh, she is certain she would have found a way, even if it meant breaking the law. I might have regretted it, but I have 2 children counting on me I need to stay alive for. She still does, and let me tell you what, a 4th C-section and a complicated pregnancy with babies that are not going to live, I wish for no horrible life-changing complications in any pregnancies that these people force them to carry to term. But at some point, somebody will die from these regulations. And I hope that their family sues the shit out of the state of Texas. I don't want it to come to that, but it will. It's inevitable. The longer these restrictions are as they are, the closer we get to the day where somebody loses their life carrying a non-viable pregnancy or pregnancy they wanted to terminate to term. And I hope to God that is the biggest news story that we have ever seen and the biggest lawsuit we have ever seen, because it will happen. This will happen. It is not a matter of if, it is when. No good option. Didn't have any information. She decided ultimately that she would not decide because she couldn't. She didn't have any options. Time passed, window closed, pregnancy proceeded. She just hoped that they were wrong. Pregnancy's coming to an end, but they're not buying any baby clothes. They're not decorating a nursery. They're not planning a baby shower. They are planning a funeral. And she's just trying to hold on to hope. She looked into surgeries, experimental treatments, miracles, mom groups on Facebook. Each week, she would go into her doctor's office, hoping for the best, bringing in research and loopholes and workarounds, asking for tests, interventions, answers. She had an MRI. She met with specialists. Her doctors looked at the pregnancy from every angle, and the answer was all the same. These babies will not survive. Brief high of believing that she'd found a solution was nothing next to the devastating crash that followed, plunging her back into the worst of her despair. As her pregnancy progressed, she forced herself to be militant about hope. I'm pretty sure I'm going to walk into my C-section with these twins and walk out with just me. That is the most heartbreaking thing I have ever read in my life. Her mother-in-law said with a guilty smile that she had a dream about Miranda delivering 2 smiley, shiny, perfectly healthy babies. And Miranda nodded politely and said, I am pretty sure I am going to walk into this C-section with my twins and walk out with just me. This is so heartless. I have taken care of so many people who have been in this situation, and this is so inhumane. Nobody should be forced to do that. This isn't what I meant to talk about today. I just clicked over and from another story, but wow, this is something. By 29 weeks, she'd go to an ultrasound. She'd know she was going to get bad news. Unless they don't have heartbeats, that would be a cherry on top. So now she's to a point in this pregnancy at 29 weeks where she's grasped onto any amount of hope that she possibly could, and there's none left. And she goes to ultrasounds hoping her babies will be dead, because it is so inhumane and horrible being forced to live this life that they have put her in, that she hopes that they won't have a heartbeat. She had to get up at 2 a.m. to get to her appointments in Dallas because she lives in Deep East Texas. Her sister had to move in with her, and they drive an hour. So, yeah, they're just talking about all the trouble that they had to go to on a regular basis to even get to all of these specialist appointments because of where they live. They had some coverage for gas and meals, but it was still crushingly expensive. There's always more bills, and there will continue to be more bills. 29 weeks, MFM and obstetrician who are going to deliver the twins. They met with the NICU. Briefly, a pinprick of hope. Why would we need to plan medical care for them if there's no chance that they'll survive? NICU says they'll be on standby for the delivery. Merely a precaution because everything's already known at this point. It's likely only to be a few minutes. She's angry that nobody can fix this. Understandably so. She's angry that her state has taken away her choice to have any autonomy in this process. She fought for her babies. She was angry for allowing hope to creep in. What is hope? She said. You told me there was a 0% chance. So what can I do to make that 3 or 5%? Nothing. What can hope get me? Nothing. This is torture. This is absolutely torture. This is inhumane. She is being punished in an inhumane fashion, and she didn't even commit a crime. She got home that night and couldn't stop crying, thought about continuing the pregnancy and how this had cost everyone in her family everything, her family, even her babies. Instead of going back to her children, she allowed her mother-in-law to tuck her into bed. She turned off her phone. I fucked up, she said, grief lacing every word. I dragged them through this. At least I can be there to say hello and say goodbye. Now she's blaming herself because she didn't have a choice. She's not, it's just, this is nonsensical. The day after grief pulled her under, she slowly bobbed back to the surface. She couldn't afford to dwell too much on the babies inside of her body when there were 3 children in the world who still needed their mother. Talks a little bit about their other children. And okay, yeah, can we please also talk about the fact that she's got other children, okay? So not only the risk of them not having her around to take care of them, she'll be out for a period of time for sure to have this surgery, but they're 5, 4, and 9 months. So the 5 and 4-year-old know that she's pregnant, and now she has to also explain to a 5 and 4-year-old why there are babies growing in mommy's tummy who will never come home from the hospital. They're all named after Greek gods. They've now had to have that life and death discussion with her 5 and 4-year-old. She at one point said maybe some gods are just needed back on Olympus, and that was the part that stuck. Aries told the neighborhood kids that his baby brothers were Greek gods who had to return to Mount Olympus, setting off a minor religious panic among the other parents. At least there's a little bit of cute humor in this, because it just keeps getting worse. How am I supposed to answer their questions when I don't even have my own answers? As she got closer to her due date, everyone in her family was being torn apart. Her father-in-law couldn't talk about it without bursting into tears. She's got her mother-in-law who has started anxiety medications. She's fretting about if she's strong enough to be in the delivery room to support her. Her husband's having to take side jobs to stay on top of the bills, and she's feeling guilty about everything. More and more guilty about the sacrifices everybody else is having to make. More and more guilty about the fact that she didn't just leave the state and do it, even though she could not do it at that time because of her situation. She feels like everybody's putting themselves in a hole because they're trying to help her or, give them money or whatever. She doesn't have enough time to emotionally process what she's going through because she's taking care of everybody else, and everybody else doesn't have time to emotionally process what they're going to because they're taking care of her. And at this point, she says, it's not just affecting me. It is affecting everyone, my entire family. We're crashing and burning. Everyone is trying to help, and I'm worried that we're lighting everyone else on fire. What a poignant quotation. This woman has been through so much. It's not just affecting me, it's affecting everyone. We're crashing and burning. Everyone is trying to help. And I'm worried about lighting everyone else on fire. The imagery in that quote is, it's so much. That is so heavy. Jesus, this is so awful. She has to relocate to Dallas for the last month of her pregnancy because she's living in small East rural Texas where it's too dangerous for her to be because, again, 3 previous C-sections, now a very complicated pregnancy that will require a very complicated delivery. And she's coming to stay at the Ronald McDonald House because she has to. So more inconvenience, more awfulness. If there's even a chance, she said in late July, she wanted to help the babies get the best care from the get-go, not risking an airplane or helicopter ride. So she's framing it as like, well, if there's even a 0.01% chance, then I want to be close to care. And that's fine. It sounds like the doctors are sure that that's not the case. But the truth is that she's at risk of having a very complex and dangerous complication during her delivery because of the way that this delivery will have to be done. Full-term twins who are conjoined do not just come out of a normal C-section incision. This is a very big deal to deliver them. She had to leave her kids behind. She's never been away from them and she's worried about them. What are they doing? Are they bored? Are they happy? Are they going to forget me? She says. Are they going to think that I ran away even though I've told them where I am? Because they're 5, 4, and 9 months. She never made it to the Ronald McDonald House. At 31 weeks, her body decided that it was time to bring the pregnancy to an end. She went into labor and she had a high-risk pregnancy. The state required her to carry, and she was 30 minutes from the nearest hospital and 3 hours from the one that could best care for her. She had to be airlifted to Dallas. I will once again remind you, we do not have universal health care coverage. You have not just committed her to this horrible, awful mind prison and body prison, but you have committed her in an already financially unstable situation to paying for this kind of stuff. I'll take a break, breather, while people are away at ads. I don't know if she had to pay for the airlift, strange charm, because I don't know. It said she was on Medicaid, so she may not have had to pay for all of it, but if she didn't have Medicaid or didn't qualify for full Medicaid coverage, then yes, but regardless, like, you pay something out of pocket usually for stuff like that. I'm just horrified, y'all. I can't, this is like, these are the things that we knew would happen and that we knew were happening. Why did this not get more coverage? Why did I not know about this? You know, this is my home stomping grounds, you know? East Texas is where my husband's from. I know where this tiny little East Texas city is. I know the hospital, even though they haven't mentioned it, that would have been the closest to her for medical care. That was too small to take care of her. And I haven't heard of this because these aren't the things that they care about. They want to talk about stuff that doesn't matter. The media cycle is too fast for things like this to be well known. All right, we're going to finish this and then we'll end the stream, but I want to hear the rest of this. So she goes into labor. She has to get airlifted to Dallas. Family has to drive, and she's all alone on the plane, contracting with 3 previous C-sections. Him and his parents drove 200 miles in record time, praying that they hadn't missed the birth or death of his children. Oh my God, that is horrific. They were almost halfway to Dallas before the plane even took off. She had to wait on the tarmac for an ambulance to transport her the last 20 minutes. And in the end, they arrived almost 3 hours before she did. I don't even know. I don't even know. This is awful. More delays. Doctors debated whether she was ready to deliver. She was sick of waiting. When they finally gave her the go-ahead, she panicked. as you would. I wanted to change my mind, she said. I wanted to go home. I wasn't ready. I don't think I was ever going to be ready. I wanted to keep them in there longer and keep them safe longer. Momentum was against her. They were in the surgical suite. They were ready to go, epidural placed. All the hope that they had kept locked away flooded back in. Doctors removed the babies from their safe harbor, and everybody held their breath. If you've never been in a room when babies are born, either stillborn or knowing that they will die in minutes or hours, let me just tell you that it is a stillness that you can feel. And a silence that is so loud. I've never heard such heartbreakingly loud silence. That's awful. And then as one, they exhaled. There was no miracle. The diagnosis was right. Her babies would not survive. From the shoulders up, the twins looked normal, although premature, tucked into each other, almost kissing, hands tied, hands tangled in a tender embrace that belies the horrors below. They each had 2 arms and 2 legs, but they were conjoined in the middle, like they had waffled back and forth on whether they would become separate people. The babies gasped slowly and inconsistently, tiny underdeveloped lungs too far from their misplaced stomachs. Doctors swaddled them, covering up the worst of the deformities, put pink hats on their heads, and handed the 6-pound bundle to her husband. A couple of minutes was all we were expecting, and then I noticed they're not moving at all, and I thought that they had died in my arms. I was crying, holding on to them for dear life. Husband started to hyperventilate, handed the babies to his mother, sat down in the corner of the operating room, sure he was going to pass out. Angela held the babies close to Miranda's head, hoping that she could spend some time with them before they died. The babies stopped breathing, but their hearts were still intermittently beating, so the doctors didn't declare them dead. In the recovery room, while Miranda slowly returned to consciousness, the family passed around the bundle, marveling at their sweet faces and discussing their deformities. After a few hours, the rest of the family left, and she had some moments alone. She'd ushered these boys into existence, given them a safe home, and helped them develop and be brought into a world in which they couldn't survive. It was hard, now that she had them in her arms, to imagine a different path with different choices. It was also hard to imagine that she'd ever recover from the experience of holding her babies in her arms as they died. She held them close and stroked their cheeks and booped their noses. Tried to project a lifetime of love onto their frail little bodies and apologized to them over and over for any pain or suffering that they experienced. Finally, at 8:14 p.m., 4 hours after they were born, their hearts stopped beating. Helios and Perseus Langley died in the arms of the mother who loved them as best she could, as long as she could. A tidal wave of grief washed over Miranda, and this time she let it take her under. I want to again say that this is how it happens even when people make this choice, and it's awful and horrible and heartbreaking and traumatic, sometimes healing depending on the patient. But it's terrible even when they've been able to choose between the 2 bad options they were given. Forcing this as the choice is just absolutely inhumane suffering. A week after giving birth, she is in the funeral home. There's a doll-sized casket, and she sees them for the last time. I feel like I've had my heart ripped out of my chest a couple of times. I know I want to be there, but I don't know if I'm ready. Months of heartbreak, a 2-hour surgery, watching her sons die in her arm. Miranda was surprised she had any grief left inside her. Saying goodbye at the funeral was one of the hardest moments of her life. Everything's a bit of a blur. I remember a patient who had a very premature baby that I delivered, and I still speak with this patient actually. This was when I was in training. I finished training in 2017, so it was a long time ago now. And she had a very premature baby, and she had a C-section. And I was sitting with her in the NICU that night, and the baby was not doing well, and they were worried that he wasn't going to make it. And I remember hugging her, and she was sobbing. And she said to me, "I'm going to have my staples," in her C-section incision. This is back when we used staples. "I'm going to have my staples longer than I have my baby." And that hit me so hard that I still almost have trouble breathing when I think about it. And that is something that now she has to live as well. You're not just recovering from a C-section anymore. You're recovering from a C-section and grieving a traumatic loss of your children. And please don't forget, she's also probably lactating. She's definitely bleeding, and she's certainly not healed at all from her cesarean incision. Her C-section scar still seared. She felt heavy and weighed down, like she could sleep forever, but at night her mind raced. Several times that week, she woke in a panic, convinced that Eros had stopped breathing, that his sleepy snuffles were him gasping for air. I think that's her 1-year-old. As much as they prepared for this, living through it was like having open heart surgery without anesthetics. Every heartbeat feels like your heart is going to explode. When Levi daydreamed about meeting his sons on the other side, Miranda worried his grief would make him do something stupid. "That's not what I meant," he said. "I know I've got kids here who need me, but those boys, all they gotta do is wait for me." I can't read. This is awful. "I'll teach them hunting and fishing. We'll get in a buggy and drive around. We're going to have some fun when it's my time." Jesus Christ. At the funeral home, a slideshow played in the background, documenting the entirety of the twins' time on Earth. Artemis, Miranda's 4-year-old daughter, watched the proceedings curiously. "These are my baby brothers," she said, more confused than sad. "They got sick inside mommy's belly, and they can't come home with us." As the pastor tried to make sense of the family's double helping of grief, the kids grew restless. They got to the cemetery, and a pitifully small pile of dirt sat next to a square hole in the family plot, in the corner of a remote cemetery right over the state line in Oklahoma. There were cows in the field next door. A big live oak tree shaded the graves of Levi's ancestors. It was peaceful. It was devastating. His father and brother carried the casket. Everyone supported them. She didn't want to leave. How do you go back to normal life after that? She birthed and buried 2 babies in the span of a week. And she wasn't ready to say goodbye. Okay, well, yes, someone said in chat that they went through this and the least I can do is listen. And yeah, I am glad that I clicked on that story, and the least I can do is narrate this wonderfully written piece from the Texas Tribune by Eleanor Klibanoff, and I will post this on the MDJ Clips channel, or the main channel, because I hope that as many people as possible can hear their story and see what they voted for. This is what you voted for. This is what you picket for. This is what you are doing. Thanks for being here. Sorry to end on that note, but I'm glad that we did that because it was important, and it is important, and it matters, and we'll try to do something less heavy next time. Thank you as always.